The 20th century marked a turning point in the story of Black people across the world. From the bustling streets of Harlem in New York to the vibrant resistance and cultural identity of Haiti, the century became a stage where Black voices refused to remain silent. These voices rose in art, literature, politics, and movements of liberation, defining a global struggle for recognition, dignity, and equality. The story of Harlem and Haiti is not merely about geography, but about the shared heartbeat of a people determined to shape their destiny and assert their cultural worth against systems of oppression that had sought to erase them for centuries. Harlem, a neighborhood in Upper Manhattan, became the symbol of Black cultural expression in the United States during the early 20th century. The period known as the Harlem Renaissance unfolded in the 1920s and 1930s, a time when African American poets, musicians, intellectuals, and artists transformed the cultural landscape. Harlem was not just a physical space, it became a cultural capital, drawing thinkers and creators who wanted to redefine what it meant to be Black in America. Figures like Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, and Claude articulated the experiences of Black life through poetry, novels, and essays. Their work gave dignity to the everyday struggles and triumphs of African Americans, shining a light on issues of race, class, and identity while celebrating the richness of Black culture. Jazz music, with legends such as Duke Ellington and Louis Armstrong, spilled out of Harlem clubs, like the Cotton Club, captivating audiences across racial lines and reshaping American music forever. At the same time, Harlem was more than art and literature, it was also deeply political. Thinkers such as W.E.B. Du Bois used Harlem as a base to advance intellectual debates about the future of African Americans. Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican-born leader of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, delivered fiery speeches that electrified Harlem's crowd. He advocated for Black pride, economic independence, and even a return to Africa as a way to escape the chains of white supremacy. Garvey's movement was global in its reach, inspiring a sense of unity across the African diaspora. While his vision of mass migration to Africa did not materialize, his ideas laid the groundwork for later Pan-Africanist movements, showing how Harlem became not just an American hub, but a global voice for Black liberation. Meanwhile, across the Caribbean, Haiti carried its own legacy of Black resistance into the 20th century. Known as the first independent Black republic, Haiti had overthrown French colonial rule in 1804 through a successful revolution led by enslaved Africans. This legacy made Haiti a symbol of defiance and freedom for Black people worldwide. Yet in the 20th century, Haiti faced immense challenges, including political instability, economic struggles, and foreign intervention. The U.S. occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934 became a focal point of criticism and resistance. Haitian intellectuals, writers, and activists responded with powerful voices that demanded dignity and self-determination. During this time, the indigenous movement in Haiti emerged, led by intellectuals such as Jean Price Mars. They argued for the recognition of Haiti's African cultural roots, rejecting European cultural dominance, and calling for the embrace of Haitian traditions, folklore, and Creole identity. Price Mars, through his groundbreaking work, highlighted the importance of African heritage as a foundation of Haitian identity, inspiring a cultural renaissance that paralleled the Harlem Renaissance in many ways. While Harlem intellectuals celebrated African American identity within a U.S. context, Haitian thinkers reclaimed their African heritage to resist cultural imperialism and assert national pride. The connections between Harlem and Haiti were not coincidental. Black intellectuals and artists often crossed paths, exchanging ideas that fueled global movements for Black empowerment. Writers like Claude, who was Jamaican-born, linked the Caribbean and Harlem in his poetry. His famous poem, If We Must Die, became a rallying cry against racial violence and oppression, echoing across borders. Haitian leaders and American activists recognized their shared struggles, and the dialogue between Harlem and Haiti contributed to the rise of a global Black consciousness in the 20th. The Harlem Renaissance and Haiti's cultural movements shared a common theme: the insistence on self-definition. For centuries, colonial powers and racist systems had defined Black people as inferior, their cultures as primitive, and their histories as unworthy of recognition. The Renaissance in Harlem and the indigenous movement in Haiti both challenged these narratives head-on. Through literature, music, and art, Harlem's creatives reshaped how black life was represented in America. Through intellectual movements and political resistance, Haiti reaffirmed its identity as a black nation, rooted in African heritage. Both movements insisted that black people had the right to tell their own stories and control their own destiny. As the century moved forward, these cultural awakenings inspired broader political struggles. The 1930s and 1940s saw the rise of movements for independence and civil rights across the African diaspora. Harlem's influence reached beyond New York, shaping Pan-Africanist thought that would inspire leaders like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya in their fights against colonialism. Haiti's resilience, despite its hardships, continued to symbolize the possibility of freedom for colonized and oppressed peoples worldwide. The voices rising from Harlem and Haiti were not isolated. They were interconnected notes in a larger symphony of black liberation. The mid-20th century brought even greater urgency to these voices. In Harlem, the fight against segregation and discrimination intensified as African Americans mobilized for civil rights. Leaders like Malcolm X, who often spoke in Harlem, carried forward the spirit of self-determination that had been nurtured in the Renaissance decades earlier. Harlem became a political stage once more, where rallies, speeches, and protests demanded justice and equality. Music also evolved, with genres like bebop and later soul reflecting the ongoing transformation of black cultural expression. In Haiti, the political landscape continued to be marked by struggles for stability and resistance against authoritarianism. The cultural legacy of Jean Price Mars and the indigenous thinkers, however, remained alive in Haitian literature, music, and art, reinforcing the importance of Haitian identity rooted in African tradition. Haitian culture, especially through its vibrant art and music, found global audiences, further connecting the island to the larger black diaspora. The idea of solidarity between Harlem and Haiti carried forward into the broader black internationalist movements of the 20s. Both places became symbols of resistance and creativity, reminding the world of the enduring strength of black voices. Harlem, with its jazz, poetry, and political debates, and Haiti, with its revolutionary legacy and cultural affirmation, spoke to one another across the waters of the Atlantic. They embodied the spirit of resilience, creativity, and determination to rise above oppression. By the late 20th century, the influence of both Harlem and Haiti was undeniable. Harlem's cultural contributions had reshaped American identity, while Haiti's proud insistence on its African roots continued to inspire. The global recognition of black history, the celebration of black achievements, and the acknowledgement of black cultural influence owed much to the voices that had risen from these two places. Their struggles were not the same, but their aspirations resonated together, creating a shared narrative of empowerment and resistance. The story of Harlem to Haiti in the 20th century is ultimately a story of black voices that refused to be silent. These voices rose in poetry, in speeches, in music, and in movements that demanded justice. They connected past and present, linking the memory of Haiti's revolution with the Renaissance of Harlem, tying the struggles of African Americans with the resilience of Haiti. They showed that black identity was not confined by borders, but was part of a global heritage that could inspire pride and unity. As we reflect on the 20th century, it becomes clear that Harlem and Haiti were more than cultural landmarks. They were beacons of possibility, proving that through art, resistance, and solidarity, black people could rise and shape their own future. The Harlem Renaissance and the Haitian indigenous movement remain enduring reminders that history is not just about survival, but about creating a voice strong enough to be heard across the world. Their legacy continues to inspire new generations, ensuring that the voices of Harlem and Haiti will never fade, but will echo through history as symbols of freedom and resilience. The Harlem Renaissance represented one of the most profound cultural awakenings in African American history, a movement that blossomed in the 1920s and 1930s, and forever reshaped the cultural identity of black people in the United States. At a time when segregation and racial prejudice still dominated much of American society, Harlem became a beacon of hope, creativity, and intellectual power. The neighborhood in Upper Manhattan transformed into the cultural capital of Black America, attracting writers, poets, musicians, painters, and thinkers who sought to redefine what it meant to be black in a world that had long sought to marginalize their voices. This period of rebirth, often referred to as the Harlem Renaissance, was more than a literary or artistic movement. It was a statement of pride, resilience, and cultural affirmation, that influenced not only African Americans, but also the broader American and global consciousness. The Harlem Renaissance did not emerge out of nowhere. It was the result of larger historical forces, including the Great Migration, when millions of African Americans left the rural South in search of better opportunities in northern cities. Harlem, with its vibrant energy and rapidly growing black population, became the central hub of this migration. The arrival of new residents created a sense of community and urgency to articulate the shared experiences of displacement, struggle, and hope. This unique environment gave rise to an explosion of creativity as people channeled their frustrations, aspirations, and identities into music, literature, and art. Harlem became a laboratory of expression, a place where voices that had long been silenced found the courage to speak. Writers and poets played a central role in shaping the Renaissance. Langston Hughes, one of the most celebrated voices of the time, wrote poetry that captured the rhythms of everyday black life, blending both sorrow and joy. His works such as The Negro Speaks of Rivers and Harlem gave profound dignity to the struggles of African Americans, while also celebrating their resilience and cultural richness. Zora Neale Hurston, another prominent figure, drew from folklore and oral traditions of the South, weaving stories that highlighted the depth and beauty of black cultural practices. Her work insisted on the importance of reclaiming African American narratives, refusing to let outsiders define the community's identity. Alongside them, Claude a Jamaican-born poet, brought an international perspective, infusing the movement with themes of resistance and defiance against oppression, most famously in his poem, If We Must Die, which became a powerful anthem against racial violence. Music also flourished during this cultural rebirth, with Harlem emerging as the birthplace of jazz and blues innovation. Clubs such as the Cotton Club and the Savoy Ballroom became legendary spaces where musicians like Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Bessie Smith redefined the sound of American music. Jazz, with its improvisation and emotional intensity, mirrored the broader spirit of the Renaissance, bold, unapologetic, and transformative. It was not only entertainment, but also a form of expression that communicated the complexities of black life, transcending barriers and reaching audiences of all races. The rhythms of Harlem spread beyond its borders, shaping the musical landscape of the entire nation, and eventually the world. Visual arts also became central to the Renaissance. Artists such as Aaron Douglas created paintings and murals that combined African themes with modernist styles, visually representing the pride and identity of African America. His work illustrated the struggles and triumphs of black people, offering powerful images that celebrated African heritage while pointing toward a future of empowerment. The Harlem Renaissance was as much about reclaiming history as it was about creating new forms of expression. Artists and thinkers drew inspiration from Africa, reimagining its significance, not as a place of oppression, but as a source of cultural pride and ancestral strength. The intellectual debates of the Harlem Renaissance added another dimension to this period of renewal. Figures like W. Du Bois argued for the importance of cultivating a talented tenth of educated black leaders who could uplift the entire race. These ideas were contested and debated within Harlem's salons, clubs, and publications, reflecting the diversity of thought within the movement. What united these debates, however, was the shared belief that African Americans had the right to define their own identities and futures. Publications, such as The Crisis, edited by Du Bois, and Opportunity, a magazine of the Urban League, became important platforms for young black writers to share their work and ideas with a wider audience. The Harlem Renaissance was not confined to Harlem alone. Its influence rippled across the United States and into the Caribbean, Africa, and beyond. It inspired solidarity among the African diaspora, creating a global consciousness of black identity and pride. It provided the foundation for later movements, including the civil rights movement, which built upon the cultural confidence and intellectual legacy of this era. The Renaissance also challenged the perceptions of mainstream white America, forcing society to recognize the creativity, intellect, and humanity of a people too often ignored or oppressed. Though racism and inequality remained entrenched, the Harlem Renaissance gave African Americans a platform to assert their voices in ways that could not be silenced. By the time the Harlem Renaissance waned in the 1930s, due to the Great Depression, its impact had already been secured. It had shown the world that African Americans were not merely survivors of oppression, but active creators of culture, thought, and art that shaped the broader human experience. Harlem had become a symbol of rebirth, where pride and creativity merged into a powerful force of self-expression. This rebirth was not only cultural but also deeply political, setting the stage for the struggles and triumphs that would follow throughout the 20th. The Harlem Renaissance remains one of the most celebrated and studied periods of Black history because it represents a turning point in the way African Americans viewed themselves and demanded to be seen by the world. It was a movement of voices rising together, from poets and musicians to painters and activists, each contributing to a chorus of cultural pride and resilience. Harlem was more than a neighborhood during those years. It was a symbol of possibility, where the past and present converged to create a vision of the future. It was the heartbeat of a people declaring that their history, their culture, and their voices mattered, and that they would no longer be confined to the margins of history but would stand at the very center of. Marcus Garvey emerged in the early 20th century as one of the most influential figures in the history of Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism, a visionary leader who believed in the unification of all people of African descent around the world. His rise to prominence coincided with the energy and creativity of the Harlem Renaissance, but his message went beyond art and culture and entered the realm of politics, economics, and global solidarity. Garvey, a Jamaican by birth, brought to Harlem a fiery determination to build a worldwide movement that would restore dignity and pride to Black people who had been subjected to centuries of slavery, colonialism, and systemic oppression. His belief that people of African descent should embrace self-reliance and economic independence set him apart from other leaders of his time and made him a symbol of hope to millions across the globe. Arriving in Harlem in 1916, Garvey quickly established himself as a commanding voice in the community. The following year, he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA, an organization that grew into the largest mass movement for people of African descent in history. The UNIA promoted a message of racial pride, unity, and the reclamation of African heritage. Garvey's speeches electrified audiences with calls for Black people to recognize their shared identity, reject notions of inferiority, and embrace their history and culture as sources of strength. His motto, "One God, one aim, one destiny," underscored his vision of a unified global Black nation, bound by common goals of freedom and empowerment. One of the central pillars of Garvey's philosophy was economic independence. He believed that true liberation could not be achieved if Black people remained dependent on systems controlled by others. To put his ideas into practice, he launched a series of economic ventures under the banner of the Black Star Line, a steamship company intended to facilitate trade and transport among Africa, the Caribbean, and the Americas. While the enterprise ultimately faced financial difficulties and legal troubles, the symbolism of the Black Star Line resonated deeply with Garvey's followers. It represented the bold idea that Black people could control their own economic destiny and establish direct connections across the diaspora. Even though critics often mocked or dismissed these ventures, the mere attempt to create such ambitious projects demonstrated the scope of Garvey's vision and his refusal to accept limits placed on his community. Garvey's message extended beyond economics to a broader sense of global identity. He emphasized that people of African descent, whether living in the Americas, the Caribbean, or Africa itself, were part of one extended family with a shared destiny. This was a radical notion in a time when colonial powers dominated much of Africa, and segregation and racism defined life in the Americas. Garvey's Pan-Africanism reimagined the African continent, not as a place of weakness or exploitation, but as a homeland that represented strength, heritage, and a future of freedom. His call for a Back to Africa movement was not simply about physically relocating, but about mentally and spiritually reconnecting with Africa as a source of pride and identity. Garvey's influence reached far beyond Harlem. His ideas resonated with people throughout the Caribbean, Africa, and Latin America, inspiring independence movements and anti-colonial struggle. Leaders who would later play pivotal roles in African liberation, such as Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, acknowledged the inspiration they drew from Garvey's writings and speeches. His movement also found a lasting foothold in Jamaica, where the Rastafari movement later emerged, deeply influenced by Garvey's teachings on African pride and the rejection of colonial systems. Even in places where Garvey himself never traveled, his words carried across oceans, stirring imaginations and strengthening resolve among oppressed peoples. Despite his immense popularity, Garvey was also a controversial figure. He clashed with other prominent Black leaders of his time, including W.E.B. Du Bois, who criticized Garvey's methods and accused him of being overly idealistic or divisive. Garvey's grand ambitions and his sometimes flamboyant style of leadership drew both admiration and skepticism. The U.S. government viewed him as a threat, and in the 1920s he was prosecuted for mail fraud related to the Black Star Line. His imprisonment and eventual deportation to Jamaica marked the decline of the UNIA's influence in the United States. Yet even in his downfall, Garvey's legacy remained powerful. His ideas of self-reliance, unity and pride could not be extinguished by legal battles or political opposition. In many ways, Garvey was ahead of his time. His insistence on global solidarity among black people foreshadowed the Pan-African conferences and independence movements that would reshape Africa and the Caribbean in the mid-20s. His belief in economic empowerment anticipated later calls for black-owned businesses and community-based development. His rhetoric of pride and identity laid the groundwork for movements such as Black Power and cultural nationalism, which would gain momentum decades after his death. For millions of ordinary men and women during his lifetime, Garvey provided a sense of dignity and hope that was often absent in the harsh realities of racial oppression. The legacy of Marcus Garvey continues to endure because his vision spoke not only to the challenges of his era, but also to the timeless human desire for freedom, equality and self-determination. His work demonstrated the power of ideas to mobilize communities across continents and to inspire generations long after the original movement had faded. Harlem gave him a stage, but his message transcended geography, creating a global consciousness that linked the struggles of African Americans with those of colonized peoples in Africa and the Caribbean. Through his unwavering commitment to the principles of pride, unity and independence, Garvey became one of the most influential figures of the 20th century, leaving behind a legacy that still resonates wherever people of African descent seek to affirm their identity and claim their rightful place in history. Haiti occupies a unique and powerful place in the history of black resistance, being the first independent black republic established after a successful slave revolution at the turn of the 19th century. The Haitian Revolution not only broke the chains of slavery on the island, but also sent shockwaves around the world, proving that enslaved people could rise, fight, and win their freedom against one of the most powerful colonial empires of the time. That legacy continued to resonate well into the 20th century, inspiring generations of Haitians and people of African descent across the diaspora to see their own struggles for dignity, equality, and independence as part of a broader historical continuum. Haiti's legacy of resistance was not just rooted in its revolution, but in its ongoing fight to preserve sovereignty, resist foreign domination, and affirm a cultural identity grounded in African roots. In the early 20th century, Haiti once again became a site of resistance when it was occupied by the United States. The occupation brought economic control, political interference, and military presence that deeply angered the Haitian people, who saw it as an insult to the independence their ancestors had so fiercely won. While the occupation imposed hardship and repression, it also sparked a renewed wave of intellectual and cultural resistance. Haitian thinkers, writers, and artists sought to reclaim the dignity of their people by celebrating their African heritage and challenging the narratives imposed by foreign powers. One of the most important figures of this movement was Jean Price Mars, a scholar, diplomat, and ethnologist who played a central role in redefining Haitian identity during this period. Price Mars is often referred to as the father of Haitian ethnology because of his groundbreaking work in studying and preserving Haiti's African cultural tradition. At a time when many elites in Haiti distanced themselves from African roots in favor of European models of culture and education, Price Mars insisted that the strength of Haitian identity lay in its African heritage. His seminal book, In Saint-Paul à l'Oncle, So Spoke the Uncle, published in 1928, urged Haitians to embrace their African traditions, language, folklore, and religion, rather than dismissing them as primitive or backward. By reclaiming Vodou, oral traditions, and African-based cultural practices as legitimate and valuable, Price Mars challenged the colonial mentality that continued to shape Haitian society. His ideas gave intellectual weight to the broader movement of cultural nationalism, affirming that Haitians should take pride in who they were and where they came from. The impact of Price Mars and other Haitian intellectuals extended beyond cultural debate. Their work had profound political implications, particularly in the context of resisting U.S. occupation. By asserting the value of African heritage, Haitian thinkers were also asserting Haiti's right to self-determination, rejecting the paternalistic arguments of the occupiers who claimed they were bringing civilization and order. This cultural resistance paralleled the political resistance carried out by Haitian peasants and workers who staged uprisings and protests against foreign domination. Together, the intellectual and grassroots struggles during this period created a powerful legacy of resistance that highlighted the inseparable connection between cultural identity and political freedom. Haiti's role as the first Black republic meant that its struggles were closely watched by others across the African diaspora. The Haitian Revolution had inspired enslaved and free Black communities in the Americas, and in the 20th century, Haiti continued to serve as a symbol of Black resilience. The work of Jean Price Mars and his contemporaries resonated with the Harlem Renaissance in the United States, where African American thinkers and artists were also reclaiming African heritage and challenging dominant narratives that demeaned Black culture. Figures such as Langston Hughes and Claude expressed admiration for Haiti, drawing parallels between the struggles of African Americans and the ongoing fight of Haitians to assert their independence and cultural pride. Haiti thus became part of a larger network of diasporic connections in which Black intellectuals, activists, and artists exchanged ideas and drew strength from one another. The legacy of resistance in Haiti also influenced the rise of movements for political independence across the Caribbean and Africa. By insisting on the centrality of African heritage, Price Mars and others provided an intellectual foundation for later anti-colonial leaders who would argue that reclaiming cultural identity was a crucial step in achieving political freedom. The Negritude movement, led by figures such as Aimé Césaire and Léopold Sédar Senghor, echoed many of the same themes articulated by Haitian thinkers, emphasizing the beauty and strength of African culture in opposition to colonial denigration. In this sense, Haiti's cultural renaissance of the 20th century was not isolated, but formed part of a global wave of intellectual and political resistance that sought to overturn centuries of domination and restore dignity to people of African descent. Even after the end of the Revolution in 1934, the themes of resistance and cultural pride continued to shape Haitian society. Writers, poets, and artists built on the foundation laid by Price Mars, using their work to critique inequality, celebrate heritage, and inspire resilience in the face of ongoing challenges. Haiti remained a nation burdened by poverty and political instability, but its legacy as the first Black republic and its intellectual contributions to the affirmation of African identity ensured its lasting influence. For Haitians, the struggle for freedom was not a single moment in history, but an ongoing process that demanded vigilance, pride, and solidarity. The story of Haiti in the 20th century demonstrates how the legacy of resistance can take many forms. It is found in armed struggle against occupation, in intellectual debates about identity, and in the cultural expressions of a people determined to remain true to themselves. Haiti's example reminds the world that freedom is not only about political independence, but also about cultural self-respect and the rejection of narratives that diminish one's worth. By embracing its African roots and standing against foreign domination, Haiti once again showed the world that Black voices could rise with power and clarity, shaping both national identity and global movement. This enduring legacy continues to inspire those who seek justice, equality, and recognition for the contributions of African-descended peoples everywhere.